Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf. Secretary Wolf, thanks for joining us here on Breitbart News Radio.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so the theme this year at CPAC is America versus socialism. We've seen, I'm asking all of our big guests this question. Can you make the case for us against socialism?
Absolutely. And I think what you see with President Trump, particularly when we talk about Homeland Security, is making sure that it's America first. It's security, the security of the American people. And so we've done that on a number of different fronts, from election security, from border security, from restoring integrity to our immigration system, and now what we're doing in fighting the coronavirus. So really for the department and for the administration, this is all about America first, making sure that we are protecting the American people.
So one of the things that President Trump did on coronavirus is he stopped the flights to and from China. That's a huge step that I don't think any other president would have taken. Can you tell us what you guys are doing in the Department of Homeland Security, what the Trump administration is doing to combat coronavirus? How are you guys fighting this?
Well, absolutely, Matt. And I think you're absolutely correct. President Trump really took a leadership position on this. So several weeks ago when he stopped flights coming or individuals coming from China that had a nexus to China, as well as funneled a number of flights into 11 airports, we were the first country to do that. We were out in front of everyone else, and a variety of other countries have now followed suit. The President and the administration got criticized for doing that too soon, too fast. And I think in hindsight, it was absolutely the right move. And now we have some of those same critics saying we're not doing enough. So I think it's very interesting. We continue to lean forward at the department. Our primary role at the department on this is making sure that we keep sick individuals out of this country. And so we do that at airports of entry, at land ports of entry, and that's a Canadian border. That's also our southwest border, but also our maritime ports of entry. And we have Coast Guard monitoring a number of ships that have a nexus to China, mainly cargo ships, but every cargo ship has passengers and crew aboard. So we're taking all variety look at this.
How does that process work? What do you do to screen people to make sure that sick people aren't coming back?
So individuals that come off flights
or whatever.
So individuals coming off flights, they'll first come into contact with a CBP officer, which is a normal immigration officer, but from there they will go to contract medical personnel that DHS has stood up at these 11 airports. So they're going to do a number of things. They're going to take a variety of information from you. They're going to ask you a number of questions. How long have you been in China? Where have you visited? They're also going to take temperature checks. They're going to do another of visual medical checks. And if they determine that they don't like what they see, or you need an additional medical check, we're going to refer you to CDC officials at those 11 airports that will go further into your medical history. We'll look at further checks. Those that don't,
before they get through into the country, before they can.
This is all occurring at an airport in a secure space at these 11 airports. So before they come into contact with any other individuals, for those individuals that are not symptomatic, we are directing them to self-quarantine, so they'll continue on to their home. They'll self-quarantine for 14 days. Again, we're tracking all of these individuals. So we're making sure and we're turning over their data and their information to local and state health officials, so those officials in those jurisdictions can also track those individuals. So it's a pretty comprehensive program that we're putting in place, making sure that those individuals, again, that have either visited or have a nexus to China in the last 14 days are being medically screened, and then we know where they are.
So there's a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about. So I know we had to hit the coronavirus stuff at the top here because that's the news. But the other thing that President Trump has done, there's been an enormous amount of successes on immigration as Trump's been president. I think one of the biggest things is ending catch and release. Another one is the safe third country agreements he's negotiated with Guatemala, Honduras, etc., other Central American countries. Different deals he's negotiated with Mexico and other countries. Can you give, here at CPAC, the rest of the establishment media refuses to cover any of this stuff because they don't want to tout Trump's successes. And they've admitted as such. Tell us the successes of the Trump administration on immigration. What have you guys accomplished?
It's been quite a bit. So let me start with we are building the border wall system on the southwest border. So we have 126 new miles in the ground today. We have over 200 under construction and another 400 in the pre-construction phase. So this is new infrastructure. This is new capability on the southwest border that our Border Patrol agents have never had before, and it's under this administration that we are building new wall systems along the southwest border. So that's one piece of it. That's the physical infrastructure. But as you indicated, Matt, there's a number of policies and programs that we have in place along the southwest border that what we talk about is catching, detaining, returning, repatriating, or removing more individuals today than we ever have before. So individuals that come in today, about 95% of them have an immigration pathway. If they have no legal right to be here, that we send them back home. So there's a number of programs. I'll talk about one specifically. It's called our Migrant Protections Protocols. So that's a process where individuals come in, they claim asylum. We make them wait in Mexico while that asylum process is ongoing. It could be several months. And what we saw, unfortunately, last night is we have activist judges. We still have activist courts that in the Ninth Circuit decide to put a preliminary injunction nationwide on this program. So last night at a number of our border entries, or POEs, what we call ports of entry along the southwest border, we had migrants lining up at the border saying, hey, the court just ruled, let me in. We had to shut down for a small period of time all of our ports of entry, or I would say the majority of our ports of entry along the southwest border, to say that's not how we're doing this. If the court tells us to do this, we're going to do this in orderly fashion. Fortunately, government lawyers went to work late last night. We got to stay on that. Migrant protection protocols are still in place today. And it's really been that program, along with a variety of others, some of which you mentioned, have really been the reason why we were able to deal with the crisis that we saw last year. If you recall, last year in June, July, and even in May, we had over 140,000 people cross the border illegally every month. That's the size of Dayton, Ohio. Every month coming in. Every month. And so a lot of the things that we've been doing over the last 6 or 7 months is making sure that we can control that. And again, that we have immigration pathways for those individuals. And we have 8 straight months of having those numbers, illegal apprehensions numbers, decrease.
So, Mr. Secretary, how about sanctuary cities? Because I think there was another big court ruling on sanctuary cities that went your guys' way very recently. Tell us about that. What are you guys doing to combat that? Because I know that stands in the way of being able to enforce the law.
Yeah, absolutely. Sanctuary policies across the country are very dangerous. They're dangerous not only for the communities that police officers serve, but it's also very dangerous for our law enforcement professionals at DHS.
Put their lives on the line.
Absolutely. So instead of having 1 or 2 officers go into a jail setting and pick up an individual and remove that individual, because again, it's usually they have a final order of removal and they have no legal right to remain in the U.S. Instead of that occurring, sanctuary cities don't allow us to do that. So then we have to go into the community at large with 10, 20 officers going into those communities to try to find that individual. And as we look at that individual, when we find him, we also find others along there. So we're picking up numerous individuals because, again, we're not going to ignore the law. We're going to enforce the law as it is. So sanctuary policies, very, very dangerous. New York, if I can talk about that for a minute, what the law that New York passed late last year went above and beyond anything that California and Nevada and a variety of other states are doing. It actually restricts sharing any information from their DMV database with any law enforcement officer, mainly ICE and CBP at DHS. So if I have an ICE Homeland Security investigator tracking an individual that's human trafficking, has an investigation, wants to pull the individual over, wants to know who's registered to that vehicle, wants to see the photo, can't do that under New York law.
Unbelievable.
Again, that's human trafficking. We also talk about child exploitation. We talk about a number of law enforcement crimes. I don't think what a lot of people don't know is that, again, ICE, Homeland Security Investigations, is the second largest law enforcement agency behind the Bureau that enforces criminal law. And what we have at New York is they do not share information. They don't share critical information.
Well, the left wants to destroy ICE. They want to abolish it, I think is the term they use, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's unbelievable. I mean, how important are our ICE agents to our national security?
Absolutely. Again, as I mentioned, ICE, we have ICE ERO, which enforces the immigration law. And as I say, if you don't like the immigration law of the books, that's fine. Go to Congress, change the law. But our officers are going to enforce the law as it's written today, and that's what ICE ERO does every day. So we have individuals that come into this country illegally that need to be removed, but we also have individuals who may come here legally but fall out of status for any number of reasons that are in various communities across the country. And when they fall out of status, again, they have no legal right to be here. ICE ERO goes into those communities and enforces the law. And then, of course, on the other side is ICE Homeland Security Investigations. Again, child pornography, child trafficking, human trafficking, child exploitation, and a number of other crimes. It's what they do every day.
So, Mr. Secretary, the other thing that's really interesting that you guys do at the Department of Homeland Security, you guys handle visas for legal immigration. And one of the things that's been really interesting under the Trump administration is there's been a huge focus on a blue-collar economic boom. We've seen all the different economic statistics on that front. How do you guys approach, just broadly speaking here, in terms of how and who to whom to award certain visas, so that the American worker is put first, if you will, right? So that way, the American worker has the chance at a job first ahead of somebody from somewhere else in the world.
So I'd say first and foremost, most of the visa policy and how visas are distributed are mainly run from Congress. So that's a legislative branch. Now, obviously, when it gets to the department, we have to administer that process. And we need to make sure, as you indicated, that we're protecting American workers while still allowing certain individuals to come in and continue to grow this economy. Best economy that we've ever had. So we need to make sure that we get the right individuals in here. And obviously, President Trump's been very vocal about that, making sure that we have high-skilled individuals coming in here, but also protecting American workers. So we're doing that on a variety of different fronts, trying to make sure that we maintain that balance. There's a number of programs that have just a tremendous amount of fraud and abuse in the program that's been going on for years and years. So we're taking a look at that, and we're trying to address that across the board. So we want to make sure that we allow some individuals to come in. We continue to put protections in place for American workers. The president's been very clear about that, but we need to make sure that this economy keeps growing. Again, best economy that I think I've ever seen in my lifetime, and we want to make sure that we have the right workforce, a skilled workforce, merit-based workforce in place to keep that economy growing.
And my last question for you, Mr. Secretary, under President Trump, we've seen the Trump administration, what you guys have done in the Department of Homeland Security, other places throughout the government, really combat radical Islamic terrorism in a significant way. The threats are significantly lower than they ever were in previous years. What are some of the things you guys are doing to talk to us about what you do to combat terrorism here in the Homeland?
So I would say that the department's primary mission, going all the way back to when we were created, is counterterrorism. So we continue to look at that. We continue to put a number of programs, procedures, and policies in place to address the overseas or the foreign terrorist threat. But what we've seen, again, under President Trump and the defeat of the caliphate and everything else, it's making that more and more difficult. And so we see through intel and through a variety of different sources, we still see those individuals operating, but their capabilities are severely diminished. And so we see less of a threat to the homeland. I'm not saying it's gone away. It's certainly not. We see less of a threat to the homeland. What we have seen, though, over the last several years...
Americans are safer.
Americans are safer because of the president, but I would say what we've also seen is we see that inspired. They can no longer travel to the U.S. It's very difficult for them to get to the U.S. because of some of the travel restrictions and some of the other procedures that we put in place. So what they're doing now is they're using the internet. They're using the internet from their caves or wherever to inspire individuals here in the U.S. To do certain violent acts. And so that's what the department is starting to focus on, is how do we identify those individuals before they radicalize to violence? How do we off-ramp them? How do we get the help that they need? And so the department's doing a number of initiatives to address that. Again, while the Department of Justice, FBI is investigating, we're trying to make sure that we prevent these individuals from radicalizing to violence.